Let's discuss electricity. You believe you understand it, right? After all, you're constantly using it. At this very moment, electrons flow through whatever device displays these words. Electricity illuminates your surroundings, preserves your food, powers your technology. It is ubiquitous, so naturally you comprehend it completely, correct? All right then, describe it to me. What occurs when you connect something to power? Where does that energy truly originate? What fundamentally is electricity? Most people offer vague responses. It is energy. It is electrons in motion. It is current flowing through conductors. But here is my problem with these explanations. They clarify nothing. They simply relabel the enigma. Yes, electrons move. But what drives them? What force propels them forward? And how does this propulsion generate illumination, thermal energy, or mechanical movement? The reality is stranger than you imagine. What we label electricity is fundamentally, extraordinarily bizarre, and our educational approach completely obscures this strangeness. We present it as ordinary, controllable, mundane. But when you perceive what is actually occurring, when you glimpse beyond the facade, you discover we're harnessing something absolutely remarkable, something that shatters your assumptions about physical reality. Let me demonstrate. Consider this experiment. Quite straightforward. Grab some plastic wrap and tear off a section. Now vigorously rub it between your palms as though warming them. Hold it close to your arm without making contact. Notice that. The fine hairs rise, extending toward the plastic. You can physically sense the plastic exerting force on you across empty space. Pause and contemplate this moment. You merely rubbed plastic. Nothing more. No batteries, no circuitry, no energy source, just mechanical friction. Yet now this plastic can reach through air and influence your body. How is this possible? In your everyday experience, forces require physical contact. You push furniture, you touch it, you grasp, you touch them. Forces demand connection. Yet here is plastic, completely separated from you, pulling your arm hairs through nothingness. Most dismiss this, static electricity, elementary school science. Insignificant, insignificant. You're witnessing the force binding every atom composing your body, the force enabling all chemical reactions, the force allowing neural transmission, muscular contraction, visual perception. You're observing one of four fundamental universal forces demonstrating its capacity for action across distance, and you consider it trivial. This represents the core problem. Electricity has become so commonplace, we've forgotten its absolute impossibility. Let's examine what transpired. Rubbing that plastic strips electrons from your skin and deposits them onto the plastic surface, perhaps several trillion excess electrons. And here is the mind, bending reality. Those surplus electrons fundamentally repel each other. They push apart with forces so immense, you cannot truly grasp their magnitude. Let me attempt explanation. Position two electrons, 1 centimeter apart. The electromagnetic force between them exceeds their gravitational attraction by approximately 10 to the 42nd power, 10 to the 42. That is 1 with 42 trailing zeros. Electromagnetic force so incomprehensibly dominates gravity that gravity becomes essentially irrelevant. For electrons, gravitational effects are meaningless, negligible. Electromagnetic interactions are absolute. So here is the puzzle. If these forces possess such monstrous strength, why doesn't everything spontaneously disintegrate? Why doesn't matter simply explode? The answer approaches magic: cancellation. Consider atomic structure. Centrally positioned protons carry positive charge. Surrounding electrons carry negative charge. Positive and negative, plus and minus. These charges obey one fundamental principle. Similar charges repel, opposite charges attract. The forces balance with perfect equality. Repulsive force equals attractive force. In ordinary matter, you find intimate mixing of positive and negative charges, protons and electrons packed as tightly as physics permits. Every positive charge surrounded by negatives, every negative surrounded by positives. They balance. The colossal repulsive forces cancel against equally colossal attractive forces. Everything remains neutral. The forces persist. Those tremendous electromagnetic forces continue acting, but they balance so precisely the net result becomes zero. And because underlying forces are so enormous, even microscopic imbalances create perceptible effects. Rubbing that plastic displaces perhaps 1 electron per trillion, essentially nothing, yet sufficient to raise your arm hairs, because when fundamental forces are this massive, even minimal excess produces observable results. This transforms your conception of matter. Pick up any object, hold it. What sensation do you experience? You think you're feeling solid material, physical substance. Incorrect. You're experiencing electromagnetic repulsion. Electrons in your hand repelling electrons in the object with tremendous force. Your inability to push through objects stems from electromagnetic forces so powerful that electrons refuse overlapping. Your hand never truly contacts the object. Not really. A microscopic gap always separates atoms in your hand from atoms in the object. You're not experiencing contact. You're experiencing electromagnetic force, pushing back. And here is what should fundamentally restructure your worldview. Every force you've ever experienced is electromagnetic. Every push, pull, sensation of touch, pressure, or resistance. All electromagnetic repulsion and attraction operating across distance. You have never genuinely touched anything throughout your existence. Every perceived touch is electrons repelling electrons through empty space. The identical force demonstrated with plastic wrap, just operating at smaller distances where forces become astronomical. Now consider wires. Wires extend throughout your home. One end connects to an outlet. The other connects to a lamp. You activate the switch. The lamp illuminates instantly. What occurred? The conventional explanation suggests electricity flows like water. Electrons enter one wire end, travel its length, emerge at the opposite end. This explanation is fundamentally incorrect. Electrons in wires move extraordinarily slowly, approximately 1 millimeter per second. At this velocity, electrons would require nearly 30 minutes traversing your house. Yet lamps illuminate instantly. So what is actually happening? Here is the crucial insight. Wires are already electron. Filled copper contains abundant free electrons, perpetually ready for movement. Closing the switch creates voltage difference. That voltage pushes electrons at one wire end. But because electrons mutually repel across distances, that push immediately affects adjacent electrons, which push subsequent electrons, which push further electrons. Imagine people standing shoulder to shoulder in line. Pushing the first person makes the last person feel it almost immediately. Not because the first person traversed the line, but because the push transmitted through the crowd. The push travels through wire at nearly light speed, not because individual electrons move rapidly, but because electromagnetic force acts instantaneously across distance. This makes electricity practical. You can push here. Something responds there, almost instantly across vast distances. But where does this push originate? Let's trace backward. Your lamp connects to outlets. Outlets connect to wall wiring. Those connect to power lines, which connect to power plants, perhaps miles distant, perhaps hundreds of miles away. And at that power plant, something rotates. a turbine mass weighing tons, spinning at thousands of revolutions per minute. That spinning motion, occurring miles away, powers your lamp. How is this conceivable? The connection between that spinning turbine and your lamp is magnetism. Electricity and magnetism are identical. They're not separate phenomena. They're two manifestations of one unified force, the electromagnetic force. Moving electric charges generate magnetic fields. Changing magnetic fields generate electric currents. They're inseparable. Here is generator operation. You spin copper wire inside magnetic fields. The magnetic field pushes wire electrons. Electrons resist movement, but the field persists. You force electron flow. That is electric current. That is everything. Motion plus magnets plus copper equals electricity. Now reverse it. Push electricity through copper wire inside magnetic fields. The field pushes moving electrons. The wire moves. That is a motor. Identical phenomenon, simply reversed. Generators convert motion into electricity. Motors convert electricity into motion. And this works because electricity and magnetism are unified. They're aspects of the same underlying force. This should seem impossible. You're claiming I can move metal in one location and other metal moves elsewhere, with nothing physically connecting them except thin copper wire. Correct. You're claiming spinning a magnet near copper generates a push traveling through wires, making other copper move. Correct. And we utilize this every single moment. Every motor, every generator, every power grid on Earth operates on this principle. Water falls at a dam. Turbines spin. Copper moves through magnetic fields. Electrons get pushed. The push travels through hundreds of wire miles at nearly light speed. It reaches your residence, makes electrons move through a motor. Your fan activates. Water falling in one location makes a motor spin elsewhere. Miles away, connected by nothing but thin metal wire. That is insane. You don't even require permanent magnets for this. Take copper wire coils, run electricity through them. Moving electrons create magnetic fields. Now move that coil near another coil. The changing magnetic field pushes electrons in the second coil. Current flows despite no physical connection. That is a transformer. That is how power grids function. Just copper, just motion. That is all required. Metal communicating with metal across empty space using electromagnetic fields. Now, here is what should completely transform your perception of reality. I stated earlier that all forces you experience are electromagnetic, all pushing and pulling, all touching and pressing. But consider the implications. The normal forces, the mechanical forces you experience daily, those are not fundamental. Those are consequences of electromagnetic force. Electromagnetic force is fundamental reality. Everything else derives from it. When you push doors, you're creating electromagnetic repulsion between electrons in your hand and electrons in the door. When you walk on floors, you're supported by electromagnetic repulsion between electrons in your feet and electrons in the floor. When light strikes your eyes, you're detecting oscillating electromagnetic fields, causing retinal electrons to move. It is all electromagnetic chemistry, electromagnetic forces between electrons in different atoms. Heat atoms vibrating because electromagnetic forces hold them in position. Biology, that is chemistry, which is electromagnetic. Your entire sensory experience of reality is electromagnetic interactions. And here is the deepest truth. You cannot explain electromagnetic force through anything simpler. You cannot say it resembles springs or ropes, because springs and ropes are made of electromagnetic forces. Electromagnetic force is fundamental. It is one of 4 basic natural forces. You must accept it as a brute fact about reality. And then everything else gets explained through it. That is uncomfortable. because electromagnetic force acts at a distance, and that violates your intuitions. You've evolved understanding contact forces, but contact is illusion. There is no contact. There is only electromagnetic forces acting across tiny distances. To understand electricity, to truly understand it, you must rebuild your intuition from foundations. You must accept that the universe is made of fields permeating all space, that charged particles push and pull across those fields. That action at a distance is the rule, not the exception. When you flip a light switch, here is the actual story. You close a circuit. Electrons throughout the entire circuit start moving slowly, about a millimeter per second. At the power plant, a turbine spins. Magnets rotate near copper coils. The changing magnetic field pushes electrons. Those electrons push subsequent electrons. The push propagates at nearly light speed through hundreds of wire miles. The push reaches your residence. Electrons flow through the thin filament. The filament resists. It is difficult for electrons to squeeze through. That resistance generates heat. The filament becomes hot enough to glow white. Electromagnetic waves radiate outward. Some waves hit your eyes. The oscillating electromagnetic fields cause retinal electrons to move. Those moving electrons trigger chemical reactions. Signals travel through your neurons to your brain, and you perceive light. Every step is electromagnetic. The turbine spinning is electromagnetic forces. The signal traveling is electromagnetic repulsion. The resistance is electromagnetic forces. The light is electromagnetic waves. Your vision is electromagnetic. Consider how extraordinary this is. 2 centuries ago, none of this existed. Then we discovered these forces. We determined how to manipulate them. We built machines that could generate electricity, transmit it across vast distances, and use it to perform useful work. And in doing so, we completely transformed human civilization. Electricity gave us instant communication. Telegraph, telephone, radio, television, internet, all electromagnetic. It gave us artificial light. Cities that never sleep. It gave us motors, machines that can perform work without human or animal muscle. It gave us computation, billions of tiny switches manipulating electromagnetic forces to process information. Every single aspect of modern life runs on electricity. And it is all based on this one insight, that there is a fundamental force that acts across distances. And if you learn to manipulate that force, you can accomplish things that would seem like magic to anyone from 2 centuries ago. So what is electricity really? Electricity isn't a thing. It is not a substance or a fluid. Electricity is what we call it when we manipulate the electromagnetic force to do useful work. But more fundamentally, electricity is proof that the world is not what it seems. The world seems mechanical, solid objects pushing against each other through direct contact. But that is an illusion. The real world is made of fields and forces acting at a distance. Particles pushing and pulling on each other through empty space. When you see plastic attract paper, you're seeing the fundamental force that makes chemistry possible. When you turn on a light, you're commanding electromagnetic fields that permeate all of space. When you understand that, when you really understand what is happening, everything changes. You realize the world is electric. That forces act at a distance. That solid matter is just a carefully balanced dance of repulsion and attraction. And you realize that humans figured this out. We discovered these forces. We learned to manipulate them. We built a civilization on top of them. That is one of the greatest triumphs of human intelligence. So next time you flip a switch, remember, you're not just turning on a light. You're manipulating fundamental forces. You're making electrons push each other across entire cities. You're converting motion to electromagnetic fields and back to motion. You're wielding power over nature itself. And that is what electricity really is. Not a utility, not a convenience, a window into the fundamental nature of reality and proof that humans can understand and manipulate that reality. That is the real story of electricity. Not comfort, not familiarity, truth.